Hi everyone! So today I'm going to show you how to make 3 different kinds of Mario block ornaments, and we're just going to get right into things. We're going to be making these out of felt, so the colors you'll need are black, dark blue, light blue, yellow, and white. Then you'll also need the pattern, which there's a link for down below. So you start off simply by cutting out all the paper pattern pieces. Okay, you see these little pieces here that I'll set aside in a second. They're really pretty much useless. They're more just a general size and shape reference, but there's no need to actually cut them out because you can't really use them, and cutting them out will likely just result in you losing them. So that's why I just set them aside until the end, but I cut them out, you don't need to. I would also like to mention that all these pattern pieces that I made 2 of, you really only need to cut 1 out. I don't know why I bothered tracing 2 of so many, but I did this in several patterns, so just do whatever your heart desires, but you really only need 1 to trace. Okay, so we're going to start off by making the question block. So you'll need to grab yellow felt. Okay, here you're going to watch me at first struggling trying to trace out the square. I thought I could use this little tiny piece of white chalk, but I quickly learned that wouldn't work. But I had an equally tiny piece of blue chalk, and I made do, but I'll figure things out better down the road here, you'll see. Once traced, I cut the first square out, and the nice thing about felt is it kind of sticks together, so sometimes it's easier to use a piece of felt as a pattern rather than a piece of paper because it doesn't slide around. So the second piece I cut out this way. Then onto the white question mark, where I thought maybe a pencil would work, but alas it didn't, and I settled on a fabric pen. This pen is specifically made with ink that vanishes after a couple minutes, but you could use any fine tip marker. Just trace about 1 millimeter or 2 away from the pattern so that when you cut it out, you can cut out on the inside of the lines and not have any ink left remaining. Alright, so now you have all your pieces cut out. Next, you'll need a needle and thread. Now, you have a couple of options. You could use yellow and white thread on the corresponding felt. It'll just blend in, you won't have to worry too much about keeping your stitches really neat. You could use opposite colors, so yellow thread on white felt and white thread on yellow felt, and it might stand out a little bit more and give it a different look. Or, if you want to be crazy, you could use black thread. It would be more noticeable, so you'd have to make sure you keep your stitches clean and even, but it could give it a cool look. Now, I wasn't sure which one I wanted to use, so I did a little test piece to see how it looked. I still couldn't quite decide, so I also tried it on the white, but in the end, I felt like it was going to be too close together, especially on the white, and I didn't think that I could make it look clean enough, so I stuck with the original colors. We're going to start by sewing the question mark. I put a tiny dot of craft glue on the back just to hold it in place as I sewed, but keep any glue away from the edges because as it dries, it can make it hard to get the needle through. So you just sew the whole way around the border of the question mark. And then once you're done, you just stitch through to the back side, double knot your thread, and clip it. Now, grab your second yellow square and line them up. If you're worried about the pieces moving as you sew it, don't glue it because you want there to be space in the middle afterwards, but you can pin it. But like I said earlier, felt kind of sticks together on its own, so they don't move around very much. Now start stitching around the border. I started near the middle of the top because that's where I wanted to finish because that's where I'm going to attach the hanging thread. When you're sewing something like this, where the stitches are going to be visible from both the back and the front side, remember to keep an eye on your back stitches. You don't want to be halfway through and turn it over only to find several knots and loops sticking out that you didn't notice. As you get closer to finishing, pause your sewing, leaving about 1 inch or so of room to insert the stuffing. Tweezers are really handy for evening out the stuffing inside, and though I use them here to insert the stuffing, it's actually kind of easier to just shove it in with your fingers and use the tweezers to move it around once inside. Then we need to pick a color of thread that's going to hang the ornament. I'm using embroidery thread, but you could use a top stitching thread, cord, ribbon, really whatever you like. I wasn't sure if I wanted to use white or yellow, but in the end I chose yellow. I then cut it at about 7.5 inches, but on the next few ornaments I decided I just liked 7 inches better. Once cut, you fold the thread in half, make a knot, and as you tighten it, move the loop to the end of the threads and tighten. I then used some craft glue, really any non-toxic white liquid glue will work, and I worked it into the ends of the thread and the knot to make it a bit more secure. Then finish sewing the pocket closed, leaving about 1 centimeter open to insert the hanging thread. It's pretty easy to secure, just make sure that you sew a stitch over the one side of the thread and a separate stitch over the other side of the thread, that way you can't pull it out. You can also add a couple extra stitches if you want to make sure it's sturdy. Then bring your needle through the back side of the ornament, double knot the thread, and the way I hide the loose ends is near the knot, push the needle through just one layer of the felt and out through the middle of the ornament, then pull the thread tighter, bunching up the felt so that when I clip it and straighten things out, the tail is pulled back inside and hidden. Squish the stuffing around a little more if needed, and I decided I wanted to round the corners a bit, but be super careful not to clip your hanging thread if you do this. Then you're done! Next, we're going to make the Mario glow block or light block, whichever you want to call it. You're going to need the square pattern, the little oval pieces, and those tiny useless pieces for reference that you maybe did or did not cut out. So cut out 2 white squares and 2 black ovals. For these, I used the pattern piece for reference of the height and width, and then I trimmed off the corners, shaping them until I was happy. I used a tiny bit of glue again to hold the black pieces in place as I sewed a couple stitches to fasten each of them on. Then, with a little scrap white piece of felt, I cut 2 tiny white ovals for the eyes. This is what you use those somewhat useless pattern pieces for reference, but I ended up just trimming and placing them on to see if I liked the shape and trimming again until I was happy. Then again, a little bit of glue to hold in place, and I use 1 stitch each to secure. And you're ready to sew the 2 white squares together. For this, you follow the exact same steps as the question block, sewing around the edges, stopping with enough room to stuff the pocket, and then almost finishing the rest of the sewing, leaving enough room for the hanging thread, fastening the thread, and finishing it off. Lastly, we're going to make the POW block. Though it looks a little bit more complicated, it follows very similar steps as the last 2. With the black square-ish piece, I forgot to cut out 2 here, and it's a lot easier to do it at this stage, so cut 2 out. Then cut all the blue pieces. I found it easier to just cut out rectangles in roughly the shape I needed, and then to use the pattern as reference to trim off the corners. And now for cutting out the letters, my battery died, but I'll show you roughly how I did it. I traced out the rough shape of the letter, again with a marker, but about 1 millimeter away from the edge so you don't leave any ink on the final piece. And then I just slowly cut away little by little to get the end shape that I desired. And now you have all your pieces cut out, plus the second black piece that I forgot. Starting with the light blue pieces, I used glue to help hold in place. I sewed around the outer edges, for now ignoring the inner edge because we'll have to do this once we layer on the darker blue, and there's really no point in doing it twice. Then layer the darker blue, sewing all the way around its circumference. Then onto the letters, gluing in place and stitching on. Okay, and this is where I realized I forgot to cut out the second black piece, so I have to do that now, but you've already done it, so good job you. And again, sewing the two pieces together all the way around the outer edge, stuff, attach the hanger, and finish. And there you go, all three done. As just a quick ending here, I really wanted to thank everyone watching this. This is my first YouTube video, so I knew there would be kind of bumps along the way, but overall I'm really happy with how it turned out. I really am excited to make more videos and keep learning with each one, but I hope you all enjoyed, and maybe I'll see you next video. Bye!